Good morning, everyone. Vice Governor Kim, the chairman, and as well all the distinguished guests here today. I'm so honored to be able to present to you on some of the Canadian activities on hydrogen, and with a significant focus on our activities in the Edmonton metropolitan region, one of the larger Canadian cities, and how we're responding to the opportunity and the challenges around hydrogen. I also want to thank the Canadian Embassy for providing me this opportunity to be here as well. So I will get into my presentation. So just some context on Canada. Hydrogen has been identified as a very important strategic opportunity area for Canada. And this has been reflected in the Canadian Hydrogen Strategy that was announced in December of 2020. And now the Canadian government working to implement the Canadian Hydrogen Strategy. The reasons for this are fairly clear, I think, if you're from Canada, but for those that aren't familiar, we have very abundant feedstocks. We're blessed with natural resources, natural gas. We're the fifth largest global producer of natural gas in the world. So significant supplies, significant renewable energy as well in the form of hydropower, solar power, wind power, and many other renewable energy technologies, leading Canada to be a leader in clean energy innovation. Many of our companies are internationally recognized as leading companies in areas like carbon utilization, fuel cell technologies, and so on. Very strong energy sector, again, is a very large producer of oil and gas. Historically, that energy sector is now moving into alternative technologies like hydrogen at a very significant pace. Strong record of international collaboration. So this meeting today, one great example of international collaboration, and many more. We've heard very recently collaborations between Canada and Germany on hydrogen, partnerships with Japan as well. So we want to continue to be working collaboratively with all countries around the world. Access to export markets. We're an exporting nation with our energy sector, and Korea represents a very important market for our energy sector and for hydrogen in particular. And we'd like to continue that dialogue while I'm here as well this week in South Korea. And of course, experienced world-leading deployment of technologies. I'll be speaking to some of those world-leading projects in carbon capture and storage, for example, but in other areas. And you'll see on the bottom the numbers, the economic impact for Canada around the hydrogen economy. By 2050, we see 350,000 new jobs associated with the hydrogen economy, domestic revenue of $50 billion, as well as an export opportunity of a similar number, $50 billion. So we see a $100 billion economic opportunity for Canada, which is a very significant impact, being part, of course, of a very large global market valued at well over $2 trillion. And for Canada, hydrogen represents a very important part of our energy mix. About 30% of our energy coming from hydrogen by 2050, again, because of some of our unique situations, circumstances in Canada, northern climate, and industries where electrification may not necessarily work as well. And of course, applications in key industrial sectors like cement, steel, trucking sector, and other industrial applications. And just when we look at Canada and hydrogen, why we see so much strong alignment and so much support for hydrogen is because in Canada, every region has a significant opportunity to play. I'll be focused on Alberta in the left side where we're from. But if you're from British Columbia, there's significant opportunities, a very vibrant fuel cell sector out of Vancouver. In Ontario, significant opportunities around some of their industries. In Quebec, of course, because of significant hydropower resources, really emerging as a strong focus on the future hydrogen economy. And most recently, 1 week ago in Atlantic, Canada, again with announcements by Prime Minister Trudeau and the German Chancellor around developing some of our hydrogen supply to support the European market. So again, very strong alignment. In Alberta, we see very significant opportunities. Alberta is Canada's largest hydrogen producer. And in fact, about 2/3 of Canada's hydrogen comes from Alberta and most of it from the Edmonton region. So we are building off our strength as an existing provider of hydrogen and increasingly low carbon net zero hydrogen. And we expect much more of that at a very, very low cost. And I'll get to that. But we also have applications across many sectors across Canada and definitely in Alberta. My region in Alberta is the Edmonton metropolitan region. We're somewhat small in size compared to the city of Seoul. We're 1.5 million people, but we are rapidly growing, one of Canada's fastest growing economies. And we represent, my organization, 14 municipalities that make up Edmonton Global. So not just the one city, but a larger region. And again, with many, many opportunities spread throughout that region, from hydrogen production to the aviation sector, to research and development as well, and the power sector, of course. So I won't spend too much time on the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, but that is really why I wanted to speak today, is because we have taken a hub-based approach, and the Canadian hydrogen strategy is also based on a hub-based approach to advancing the hydrogen economy. Edmonton Region was the first hydrogen hub established, and by far the largest hydrogen hub, given our size as a large producer of hydrogen today. And we have strong support from many of our municipalities, from the municipal governments, the provincial government of Alberta, and the federal government of Canada, all supporting and playing a major role in our hydrogen hub, as well as 2 First Nation communities, Indigenous First Nations. We know we need to be involving Indigenous nations early in the process, because I think we've experienced some experience in when we have not engaged early on, that has not allowed us to develop our resources as we need to for hydrogen. So a unique approach to bring together a large partnership of government organizations as well as non-government organizations to move forward. So our hub is a virtual hub where it brings together expertise to allow stakeholders to come together to share information and allow us to create the vision for what our hydrogen economy should look like in the Edmonton region. We solicit input from industry, from other stakeholders, and inform analysis and inform programming that's delivered by the provincial government or the Canadian federal government, so they understand any new projects must align with that vision for our hydrogen hub. It's all about making information public and very transparent. If you go to the Edmonton Hydrogen Hub website, you will see all the reports that have been prepared to inform decision-making, whether it's in hydrogen production, hydrogen transportation, or hydrogen use in key sectors like heavy-duty trucking. And you'll see how we're organized around the themes of supply of hydrogen, fleets in particular, municipal fleets at the city level, as well as commercial fleets from industry, and then also now moving into buildings and power opportunities. So what I speak today is some of the core assets we have and how a hydrogen hub is allowing us to advance on these topics. I will spend more time on the initial themes because those align very well with this the topic for this symposium today, particularly around policy. So when we talk policy around hydrogen, policy is developed at the regional level, at the provincial level, and at the Canadian national level. And often people think maybe policy becomes top down from the federal level down, but in fact, in our region, it has been our regional approach that has informed policy from a bottom-up perspective. So on the left side, the Alberta Industrial Heartland Hydrogen Task Force, about 2 years ago, prepared recommendations on how Canada, and our region in particular, has a significant economic opportunity, but it needs to be done in a coordinated approach around hubs. And that same approach was reflected in the Alberta Natural Gas Vision and Strategy, which identified hydrogen as a very strategic opportunity for us, as well as the Hydrogen Roadmap that was released several months ago, and certainly in the Canadian Hydrogen Strategy as well, which really recognized we can build off of our strength in the Edmonton region as a world-scale provider of low-cost, low-carbon hydrogen. And just some statistics to show why we say we are the low-cost provider of hydrogen. This study was prepared in 2018, so it's becoming slightly old, and it does need to be updated to reflect some of the changes in prices. But you'll see at that time, Canadian natural gas plus carbon capture and storage allowed us to produce low-carbon hydrogen at the second lowest price in the world, only behind Russia. And I do like to comment, I've been working on carbon capture and storage for 20 years, and I'm not aware of Russia projects anywhere close to the the level of activity in our region on carbon capture and storage, where we've had projects now like Shell Quest storing 1 million tons of CO2 for over 7 years. So we have a strength we can produce at a large scale. The challenge is now how to leverage off of that strength to get hydrogen to end users in transportation, heat and power, exports as well. And that is a significant effort underway to do that. You'll also see other Canadian hydrogen production opportunities, including coal gasification, renewable power. All of these costs we know are coming down, but the same goes for hydrogen produced from our natural gas resource. And in a moment, you'll see the reason we have such low cost hydrogen is because we have very low cost gas in Alberta, and that will continue to be a discounted product compared to the North American average price for natural gas and the global price. And you can see that wedge very recently becoming very significant. Our gas always trades at a $1 to now $2 discount compared to the North American average. So we are a place where we can continue to produce low-cost hydrogen from a natural gas with carbon capture and storage because of these characteristics of our energy supply. So the approach that we're taking in our hydrogen hub is to leverage our assets as a low-cost producer of hydrogen to create a vibrant hydrogen cluster that goes from not just producing it, but now using it in key sectors, beginning with the heavy-duty truck transportation sector, but also buildings, natural gas blending in our residential distribution systems, municipal fleets, the heavy-duty locomotives now, and the aviation sector. So really looking at diversification of our opportunity and even attracting companies to our region as they look to access both the low-cost hydrogen as well as participate in the manufacturing of the key equipment that will be used in our sectors. So we talk about a base case in the Edmonton region. A base case is really our vision for how we plan to grow the hydrogen economy from 2022 to 2032 to 2050. So we've identified all the locations in our region where we can supply hydrogen for commercial trucking fleets, municipal fleets, buildings. These are all color-coded on this slide. So I know Edmonton's a long way away from Seoul, so this may not be as meaningful, but it really allows us to show how can we connect some of these key users of hydrogen through smaller investments in key infrastructure like pipelines that can connect hydrogen production to hydrogen use. So that's a major focus of our hydrogen hub. And we've quantified, again, what does that hydrogen demand look like from these sectors? So we see 20,000 Class 8 heavy-duty trucks that it will be economic to use hydrogen because of the Canadian carbon charge, Canadian regulations that are moving industry to look at hydrogen. It will be a combination of hydrogen fuel cell trucks, but we also think a dual fuel system where you can co-combust hydrogen and diesel to accelerate the transition towards the hydrogen economy. And just this week, I did have meetings, of course, with Hyundai leading companies, OEMs, and we want to bring those vehicles into Canada, into Edmonton very quickly so we can demonstrate those to our industries that are very, very anxious to learn about how to use hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We know that we need fueling stations. We will begin the initial refueling infrastructure in the next year, and we will see probably 60 refueling stations established by 2032. Similarly, the kilometers of local pipelines to connect hydrogen within our region and the overall numbers of demand. You'll see earlier the focus will be on the heavy-duty trucking sector, the green wedge, but over time, heat and power will also be a key opportunity that we'll be building off of. Just briefly, I won't go through everything here, but we have many pilot projects in our region to demonstrate hydrogen technologies to our trucking sector. You'll see logos here. I would love to see a logo like Hyundai Motors on this graph as well, so we can, again, demonstrate those technologies. We're building our own hydrogen fuel cell truck that can operate in our very cold winter conditions, our heavy loads for our trucking sector. So that will inform OEMs what we need to see in our region to make hydrogen work and what type of fueling infrastructure. We're looking at bus fleets. Again, Korean companies can provide hydrogen fuel cell buses. Our city is expecting to make a very large commitment towards hydrogen fuel cell buses because we know battery electric While it will have some use, will not necessarily meet our needs in a cold weather environment. So hydrogen looks like a very strong contender for the bus fleets. I mentioned rail locomotive pilot projects in both Edmonton and our sister city to the south, Calgary. And finally, a blending project where we're injecting 5% hydrogen into our natural gas distribution system, and we expect to grow that further over the coming years. The last area I would like to highlight is the aviation sector. We have an airport that has made a net zero commitment by 2040. It's the first airport in the world to do that. And it's moving very aggressively on hydrogen within the aviation sector environment. And you'll see here a number of partnerships that were announced earlier this year at the first Canadian Hydrogen Convention held in Edmonton. This convention will be held every year in Edmonton, so I hope we'll see a strong contingent of industries and partners from South Korea coming next year in April. We had many announcements, many of the companies and technologies that are supplying technologies to the Edmonton airport have been announced, including Toyota Mirai vehicles, fuel cell buses, dual fuel systems at the airport, and hydrogen refueling infrastructure, and other announcements. A very recent announcement for Zero Avia, a world-leading hydrogen fuel cell company working on aviation to demonstrate refueling infrastructure for their hydrogen airplanes at our airport. Just nearing the end, but we also have announced a clean hydrogen center of excellence from the Alberta government. That's part of the Alberta Hydrogen Roadmap, beginning to make investments in earlier stage technologies at a lower TRL level, TRL 3 to 6, and other programming coming which will support technologies at a higher TRL level through Emission Reductions Alberta, one of our major funding organizations at the provincial level. And it will fund technology development across the entire hydrogen value chain, not only production, but hydrogen transportation, hydrogen use, as well as ecosystem development. And one of the other areas, we tend to forget about the labor force. And for me, this is very important. If we look to go after the hydrogen opportunity, our hub approach can inform what does that labor force need to look like in our region to pursue not just the major new production projects. And again, we see many production projects, $30 billion coming in the next 10 years. So we need the workforce for that. But we also need the workforce that can understand things like hydrogen fuel cell technologies. Some of that expertise is very concentrated in certain parts of Canada, and we need to make sure it's available across our region, which will be an early user of fuel cell technologies. So we're doing a labor market assessment to understand a quantifiable assessment of the number of personnel we will need in certain segments of the economy and where exactly they'll be located throughout the region. So just in closing, the next steps for our hydrogen hub and for Canada is to continue to implement the Canadian hydrogen strategy. International partnerships are a key part of that. Beginning to implement a number of programs. There are very significant dollars in our programs in Canada. Well over $10 billion announced. I think it's probably closer to $15 billion now to support projects. We also want to focus on carbon intensity. I know I heard for this group the focus on renewable energy, but we want to show that we can produce low carbon, low cost hydrogen or net zero hydrogen regardless of being derived from solar, wind, or natural gas and carbon capture and storage, but to have a carbon intensity standard. And that's something the Canadian government, the Alberta government, and my region are all very focused on. We'll continue to implement the hydrogen roadmap through policy decisions around things like the treatment of hydrogen within natural gas utility systems, continuing to grow our hydrogen center of excellence, and continuing with the export opportunity. And that is so important, we know, for South Korea, and we want to be seen to be one of the key exporters of hydrogen or ammonia to this region, because we know we can do that in a very low-cost manner for a very long period of time. And in the Hydrogen Hub, we'll continue to implement our base case. We'll be focused on new pilot projects beyond the first ones I mentioned. And just recently announced yesterday support for a supply chain mapping project. So we will map out all of our companies that make up our hydrogen supply chain within our region so investors know who they can work with, and continuing to engage industry. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present our Hydrogen Hub to you, and I look forward to any questions later.